All right. So I was 9 years old on March 31st, 1985. And if anybody knows, that's the date of the first WrestleMania. And in the main event was Hulk Hogan and his tag team partner, Mr. T, going against Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And that's who I have today. I got Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff's son, Travis Orndorff. What's up, Travis? How you doing, man?
What's up, brother? I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, John. Anytime I get a chance to talk about my father is a blessing. He's so many things. He was in WrestleMania. Let's not forget Muhammad Ali was a special referee.
That's right.
Cyndi Lauper was over in Hulk Hogan's corner.
That's right. Liberace was there.
Bob Orton with the cast on was over in Dad's corner, right?
Ace? That's what Roddy Piper used to call him, Ace.
Ace.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of my favorite, videos, my dad's performances when he comes down, it was after WrestleMania and he goes in the ring and he calls Ace a dunce.
Oh, really? Okay.
The Piper's pit. Yeah. Piper's sitting there and he's like, go over to the corner, dunce. Which, in 1985, that's probably an appropriate way to say something that we would probably say it different now. But
yeah, right.
It was, man, that was so beautiful.
Yeah. Listen, man, you gotta, how old are you, Travis? If you don't mind me
43.
asking. Oh, so you're the same age as me. So generation X, our generation, that your father is our childhood. And I know he's your dad, but he was a tremendous part of my childhood. I grew up in Brooklyn, right?
What a shock. I would have never guessed that. But so John, I was like, is he from Australia, South Africa?
Yeah.
No, Brooklyn.
Yeah. And on Saturday mornings, I used to go to I was on a basketball team, believe it or not, at St. Athanasius Catholic School, which was actually the same Catholic school Lou Ferrigno went to because he was from the same neighborhood. And when I used to get home from St. A's basketball practice, it was WWF time. It was wrestling time on Saturday mornings. And I used to plop my ass in that seat and I was glued to the TV, man. And I would have my pillow and my dog. And I don't know who got it worse, my dog or my pillow, because I used to kick the shit out of both of them. Man, it was unbelievable. So, there's so many questions that I want to talk to you about, but basically, I only know your dad from wrestling, and he was probably one of the greatest heels of all time. But from what I understand, that really wasn't his persona.
Man, so we can go back to his childhood, and what I would share is he grew up in a broken home. That's the easiest way to say it, but he was molested. Both physically, he was verbally abused, he was physically abused. There's a story about he would tell me when I was a kid, I used to work in the chicken coop so I could pay for my shoes to play football.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think he was like 15 years old, came home, he had worked several days in a row, and his mother wanted his money, right? And so he told her no, but he came around the corner, didn't know she was there, and she knocked him out with a cast iron skillet.
Wow.
And took his money. So my dad started bare knuckle fighting at about, I think, 16, 17 years old. He was still playing for Brandon High School. He won. He broke records in the shot put, the broad jump. In college, he won the gold medal in rowing. There wasn't a sport he couldn't master.
He was a natural athlete.
A complete freak. And he knew he was. And he could, whatever it was, like he had a record in the discus. And you're talking about the late 70s. And I'll tell you kind of a quick short story because, it's Black History Month right now.
Mhm.
My dad played in the first interracial college football game.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So he played for the University of Tampa. They played FAMU, and I think it was 1968. Or
Okay.
1969. But think about that, like the first interracial college football game.
Right.
So the Marching 100, which is the band for FAMU, they were playing, and all the players on Tampa's team went to the coach and they're like, "Can you shorten the halftime speech so we can see this band?"
Right.
And so my dad scored two touchdowns. The FAMU paper, as my dad told me, said it was like they had said he was the fastest white man in Florida. And at the end of the game, the FAMU won, but it changed it changed race relations for an entire generation.
Mhm.
So he has been in so many situations that were life changing, like that game, WrestleMania. It's just crazy to think about what his legacy has meant to people, and the things that he had the opportunity to be involved in, and he
Mhm.
was so proud of.
So now I know your dad was a great football player. He was an All-American. Was he drafted from the NFL?
He was, I want to say he was drafted by the Saints. I know it's the Saints. I think it was the 12th round. The draft was so much different
Yeah.
back in the early 70s. I know Matuzak went from the University of Tampa, number one, to Oakland. Freddie Solomon went like in the third round, I think, to San Francisco. Had a great career as a wide receiver. My dad played for Earl Bruce, and I can't remember the coach before that, but when he left Tampa, his spirit was broken, and that coach broke it. And I'm not sure what happened exactly, but I know that his college football coach and his high school football coach and the first college football coach were instrumental in his development personally and professionally. But I think it was Earl Bruce, and I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look, but the last coach he played for just destroyed his spirit. So when he went to the Saints, my understanding was that he didn't acclimate well to being a rookie. They would put him on stage in dresses and things like that. And
Hazing, the hazing, yeah.
Yeah, hazing. He was not like, yeah, no, he was not having it. He was, and I think it was insecurity, based on his childhood. I think that makes sense that,
Right.
The psychology of people is so funny, but I just think my dad couldn't handle that kind of scrutiny. So I know he went from there to the San Jose Sharks or the Jacksonville Sharks or something like that, went to the USFL. I think totally played like 4 years. And short version of him going into wrestling. My dad was watching wrestling on a Saturday morning with my grandfather, my mom's dad, Ross Lee Maxwell, my soulmate. And my dad said, "I think I can do that." And my grandfather, who worked in insurance, knew Hiro Matsuda. So he said, "Okay, if you think you're going to do that, I'll make a phone call." So that was on a Saturday. On Monday, my dad was in the gym with Hiro Matsuda and doing, his challenge was to do 1,000 Hindu squats. And my dad did them, but he did jumping Hindu squats.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "Why are you doing that?" And he was like, "That's what I do. I don't understand. I thought that was the squat you were asking for."
Right.
And they had a lower expectation, but he went from there to, Bill Watts. And Bill had a conversation with him one night and said, "Paul, if you don't show me something tonight, you're done. Like, you have no future." And Dad went out and became the Brandon Bull.
All right, let's back up a minute, if you don't mind. I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to get to his childhood a little bit, and then if it's great, if we could explain who Bill Watts is and so on and so forth. When you said, and if you don't want to get into detail or just let me know whatnot, when you said he was molested, was it from his mom or another?
No, it was from his. So he was born in Winchester, Virginia.
Okay.
His father was a World War II veteran, and but he was a butcher, and his mother Man, that's a whole nother conversation. But
You don't have to get into detail.
no, I don't have the detail because we
Oh,
weren't allowed to be around her.
I got you.
So they moved to Tampa at a very young age, but he was molested by his uncle.
Mhm.
Um,
How old was he when that happened?
oh, 6.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So he was
Wow.
very young. And so what a shock that he became a fighter, right? Like
Yeah.
I always
Did he tell anybody, or he kept it to himself, or
so it took me pro- it took a
we could skip it, man. We could skip. We
no,
don't have
no,
to talk
no. I don't
about
want
it.
to skip it. I don't want to skip it. This is real. Just give me a second.
Yeah, take your time, dude.
It took me 35 years to tell him I was molested.
Oh my God. And I did
And
not want to open up that can, man. I am so
no, no,
sorry.
no, no. This is how you heal, bro. And I'm okay with it. Um, he looked at me and his heart was broken, and it wasn't what he dealt with. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. He was raped.
Oh,
It was totally different. So, I looked at my dad and I knew, but, I just said, "Hey, Dad, this happened one time." And, he looked at me and goes, "I know it happened to me." And so he had shared it with our pastor. And it was probably 2 years ago. The pastor sat down with me and said, "Your dad wanted you to know this," which was funny because I remember sitting with my dad so many times and he'd say, "Travis, I can't tell my story right now, but someday it's going to be your responsibility. I'm not sure how it's going to look, but it's your responsibility to tell my story." And I was like, "Dad, that is way too much to put on a child. Like, what are you asking me to do?" And then after you passed, the story started to come to me and it made sense. Right. So
mhm.
I say all that to say it was brutal. It was brutal. Like he literally had to, at 8 years old, work at the chicken coop so he could buy his own tennis shoes to go to school. And that didn't change, until, really he went to the WWF. When
Right.
they were going out in those territories, he was making $50 a night and paying for his own expenses.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear about these things way too often, uh, but I have to believe that back then, if it was, if people knew, because it was in New York, you call it street justice. If people knew, especially your dad's upbringing and coming from West Virginia, if people knew, they probably, I would have to believe that they would probably have taken things into their own hands.
Absolutely. I just don't,
There's no question about it, because
no question.
I
Nobody
know.
knew what to do with it. If you really want to break it down, there was so I had a counselor that I worked with. Her name was Linda Hudson, and she worked out of Marietta, and she was part of the Clinton administration. But she had started with, there was a movie on NBC about Ted Danson, or with Ted Danson, and it was about a child molestation, right? I'm not sure. It was like 1986. And so she was part of the team that opened up the phone lines to they put that was like one of the first times ever that they put that, little thing to, like, the more you know, NBC kind of thing. They said, "If you've ever been molested, call this number." So they
Mhm.
had like 4 or 5 people working there, and it got so out of control that they had to hire hundreds of people, but they
Right.
had no idea it was coming
Mhm.
because, in those days, how many thousands of years have priests got away from it?
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, just things you didn't want to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's move on. You said your father was a bare knuckle fighter. Um, how did he get into doing that, and how long was he doing it for?
So he He probably longer than he needed to. I'll tell you that.
All right.
So, at the time, his dad was a mean drunk, a real mean drunk, and so he would go to the bar to pick him up, and it kind of escalated into fights, and then eventually it became, they would pay you to fight, and so I want to say he was 17,
Yeah,
when that started, and he had a flavor for it. There was no UFC,
yeah.
but can you imagine if my dad was a UFC fighter?
Well, that's probably the route he
You
would.
know what I'm
That's
saying?
probably the route he would have went into if he was, born today. If he was around today, that's probably the route he would have went into.
Well, they didn't let him wear flip flops in the UFC.
Oh
so
yeah, we'll get to that story. We'll get to that story. Yeah, that's right. We'll get to that story. Yeah.
So
I probably know all the stories already, but I just, I it's unbelievable. We'll get to why. I don't know why they were so much tougher back then.
But so I'll say that he bare knuckle fighted. I want to say, and Brian Blair and I had this conversation maybe 6 months ago after Dad passed, and and we talked about it when we were at the Cauliflower Alley Club, and Brian would say, "Dude, you just don't understand. Like, it was like Fight Club, and your dad whooped everybody's butt."
Yeah.
Like,
He had a reputation of
over
being
and over.
yeah. He had a reputation of being really, really tough. And since we're on the topic, the two names that stood out to me the most from the interviews that I've seen, not of him, but other people talking about him, which in my mind makes it even more real, is when other people are talking about you, not yourself, was Tony Atlas, where he kicked the shit out of him. And the other one was Vader, where he kicked the shit out of him. Those are the two that stood out. There were probably others. There were probably more,
There's a list. No, I'm not, John. I'm not kidding, bro.
Yeah.
There's a list. Dad had it, and so you have to understand. I got my dad. In fact, my dad and Brian Blair were there when I was born. Like, they were in the room, and Brian always tells me the story. He's like, Paul, your dad goes, "Hey, is that one mine? He's got a lot of hair. It's black. You sure?" Years later, I get my DNA test, and I'm 73% Italian. And I'm like, Dad, Orndorff kind of sucks. Turns out it's hill people, and it's northern Italy. So most people with the last name Orndorff are Italian.
Oh, wow. Oh shit. Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah, okay. Completely. Now, my dad looked like a complete Viking.
Yeah,
but
right.
I call America the Red, if you will. But he fought for money, but he also fought to, I think, keep his mind sane, that he could overcome his demons.
Yeah, well, I think you go into one or two ways when that's something that tragic happens. You either crawl up into yourself and become depressed and suicidal, or you, as a boy, you probably lash out and you become physical. Like, we've heard stories of your dad. We heard stories of Mike Tyson. You go down the line of
right.
And
Mike had a coach that really centered his anger. My dad was a little different. It was just kind of sporadic anger. And so I want to make sure I give my grandfather credit, Brosley Maxwell. If not for my father getting my mom pregnant, he would have not had a stable force in his life like my grandfather, that took him from all these, random bar fights and bare knuckle fights and football, and said, "Let me talk to Hiro Matsuda for you."
Okay.
And focus his discipline, if you
right. Will. Yeah. And I think a lot of young boys need that. I think a lot of young boys need, and that's why they go into football and UFC and so on and so forth. Now, explain who, I'm going to ruin his name. You pronounce his name right. I don't know. Say it again.
Hiro Matsuda?
Yeah. Explain who that is.
So he was a wrestling coach, and we're talking back in the early 70s. He was a famous wrestler from Japan, arguably the most technical wrestler of all time.
Mhm.
And so you go back to foundational excellence, right? You
Right.
can have the people's elbow, you can have a leg drop,
Right. Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not taking away from finishes, but that's not wrestling.
No, it's not. That's showmanship. Yeah.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
And Hero had the ability to give you the conditioning you needed to go for 45 minutes in a match.
Yeah. That's right.
We
But
don't
back
see that
then,
anymore.
no, not that. Back then, that was not so much the WWF style, but that was the style of the AWA and NWA and so on and so forth.
Right.
Long,
So,
overdrawn matches. Yeah, absolutely.
but they weren't overdrawn. They brought you in. Some of it
Big
you need
time.
to sit down for, and that's okay. Like if you've ever been to church, the pastor doesn't keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
He keeps you on your edge of your seat at the right time.
Right. Right. Okay.
So, you know, Hero was, and he's the goat of training.
Okay.
He's the goat.
So then,
And
how does he go?
think about the people that came out of there. Hulk Hogan.
Oh, really? See, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh yeah, Hiro Matsuda trained Hulk Hogan. Like this is in Tampa, Florida. Hero brought out more talent than anybody ever did.
Mm-hmm.
What Bill Watts did was refine it.
Okay. Now explain who Bill Watts is.
So Bill was he was out of Oklahoma at the time, I think, but he was a territory manager and a promoter, and he just understood talent, and he understood. So give me a second. Understand that back then they did not perform for a camera; they performed for a crowd.
Right.
So it was a different pace. It wasn't TV, and Bill took my dad aside and taught him how to be a heel, how to have an identity. Dad had no identity. Right. He had all the intensity in the world, but no identity until he knew how to anger the crowd and piss people off. Then he's like, I know my calling.
Right.
Like Moses, he's like, I'm taking them to the promised land. Dad, and Bill brought that out of him. And that was what the son of a great promoter was, getting you to understand your gimmick. But Dad's gimmick wasn't a gimmick. It was Dad.
Oh, okay. That's exactly what Ric Flair says. He says, how do you get your promos? He goes, from the night before. When all the girls and all the jewelry and all the money and all the spilt whiskey and so on and so forth. He goes, that was just what we were doing the night before.
Right.
So where does your father start wrestling?
So he started in Tampa, right, with Hiro Matsuda. Now, so I was born in, I think he started wrestling in 73. Maybe might be in 76, but I was born in 78. My brother was born in 68. So he started in Tampa. I know when I was about 3 years old, we were in Pensacola. We had lived in Fort Walton Beach. We had moved from there to Oklahoma. We lived in Tennessee for Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We were in North Carolina for a short period of time. And he had turned down Vince McMahon Sr. when he was in Atlanta because he didn't think he was ready. It intimidated him to be in the New York territory. And, at that time, it was still in New York territory. Vince Jr. had not, developed a deal with, USA Television. So my dad was like, I've got some security down here. We lived in the apartments of Riverdale, Georgia, which was, a low income area. And I was going to a small Montessori school. My dad made sure that the money that he did made, put me into private school, even at that time. And then, he signed with the WWF with Junior and Senior at the time. And, they developed him into a, kind of a prodigy for wrestling. Dad's body, people are still trying to duplicate it.
Yeah.
My best friend Kevin was texting me earlier. my dad's funky elbow he did back in the early 90s, right? And he's like, where do you think The Rock got that from, bro?
Yeah.
And
And that happens a lot. People don't realize that happens a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your father was not a main eventer until he got to WWF?
No, he was before that.
Oh, he was a main eventer. NWA was a main eventer. Did he ever have a title run before?
Oh, he had multiple title runs.
Okay.
Multiple. And if you go to his Wikipedia page, because none of us are that smart or can remember there's a list of his tag team championships with Jimmy Snuka. There's a list of his different heavyweight championships. But when he was with WWF, he never got a title. And I'll tell you, it was a funny story. I was really young, right? I was like 8 years old. And I remember Randy Macho Man Savage had the Intercontinental Championship. And I didn't know anything about wrestling. I just loved my dad. And I just said, Dad, why does he have the title? Why don't you have it? You're better than him. And he said, because I rejected it.
That's not the first time I've heard that either.
He said, if I'm going to get a belt, it's going to be the world championship belt.
Okay.
The rest of them, I don't care.
Right.
And so, that's not humility, but that was who he was.
Right.
Like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the right way.
At the time, though, it had to be known that the golden child was Hogan. And he wasn't going to drop the title. Everybody knows the stories of him being political and able to pull the strings, and WWF and then WCW, and then him trying to do the same when he came back in WWE, but it didn't work. Nobody was going to have the title but Hogan until Vince found the Warrior. And of course, that didn't even work out, because you could have gave the, from what I understand, a little bit of wrestling, I understand the majority of wrestling territories gave the title to the heel because everybody wanted to see them lose, and they would come to try and cheers for the good guy. And they were
70,000 people came to Toronto thinking my dad was going to win.
Right, exactly. And then they usually win by some, the bad guy will win by some, cheating, or somebody
pulled out the tape.
And
the foreign object.
Exactly. Right. And then the people would go nuts and so on and so forth.
Or they touch feet down on a cage and beat them by a split second.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I think
it's controversial because he won.
Right. Yeah. And I think the most famous one was probably, to me, again, this is just my opinion. You know a lot more than I do, but in my opinion, the most famous cheating heel title change was when superstar Billy Graham beat Bruno Sammartino, and his feet were all the way on the top. And that was
ropes. 1981.
That was a long time ago. Yeah, and
we were a couple years old.
Yeah. I'm just a wrestling nut, old school wrestling nut. But when Hogan came, he kind of Vince changed everything. It was like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We have the golden child, and then that's kind of it. So did your dad realistically think that he was ever going to get a world title at WWF? Because I don't think anybody ever really realistically thought that they were going to.
So I would disagree.
Okay,
and I could be wrong.
All right.
Dad and I've had these conversations over and over. I remember sitting on a plane having this conversation. And so I think Vince dangled the carrot. I think Vince dangled the carrot.
I could see that. Yes, I could definitely.
And it was always next time. So, for example, he was the backup behind Andre the Giant for WrestleMania 3. But he wasn't really the backup. They assumed my dad was going to wrestle. And Vince and Andre was out, and Andre came through, right? So I think you would have to be in my dad's shoes, knowing that this isn't a humble conversation. I think he knew he was due, and that was his peak. It was his peak. So my dad knew he had, a timeline. And so I think he tried to force the hand. Vince wasn't ready.
Mhm.
And knowing my dad, his personality did not win Vince over. Like
Yeah.
my dad was he was a bare knuckle fighter,
Yeah. He
both
said
in
it was,
conversation and in real life. Like,
yeah.
so I don't think he could sit down and go, "Hey, Vince, here's what I'm thinking. Here's where my heart is. Here's how I feel. Here's
Mhm.
what I'd like to see. Can you help me understand what your vision is?"
Mm.
That's not, but my dad taught me that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
irony. My dad always made me understand the business side that he never understood.
Well, even if your dad did, I don't think Vince would have anything would have changed Vince's mind. Vince
I
McMahon,
disagree.
really,
I
really,
completely disagree.
really.
I think my dad's strong-headedness made Vince afraid to put the title on him.
Oh, okay, all right, that could be it.
Like, what is he gonna do if I do
Yeah,
this?
I don't have any.
My dad's bipolar. Like, and I say that with all due respect, but you have to understand if you are a CEO of a company, you cannot hand the title to somebody you can't trust to
Okay,
to
okay.
to to be normal or handle yourself in normal day. Hulk was easily controlled. My
Yeah, okay.
dad was not, you could not control my dad.
Right, right,
Period.
right, right,
Don't
right.
ever question that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough as as a kid that I could look at my dad and go, "Dad, quit being Mr. Wonderful. It's me." And
Yeah,
he'd
right,
go,
right,
"I'm sorry, son." And then he would hold my hand and remind me he was
right,
my
right, right,
daddy.
right,
But
right.
name three other people that could do that. There wasn't. It was me. That was all
Right,
there
right,
was.
right.
I was the only person that could bring him back to level.
Were you his only son?
No, I have a brother that's 10 years older.
Okay.
Um, he unfortunately has been incarcerated most of my life, probably since I was about 6 or 7 years old. Um, crazy. He's not a bad human being. He just has made so many bad choices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's it. It's just the two of you.
Yeah. Well, he had
Yeah, I know. I know where you're going with this. Yeah,
yeah. So I have two children.
yeah.
My oldest is Tyler, my youngest is AJ. My oldest is going to law school.
Wow, really?
Well, right now he's at Kennesaw State, but I hope he hears this because he's already committed to law school, and I already committed to paying for it. So
Yeah.
his butt's going to law school, and he's won several awards this year on mock trial. So I'm proud of him. And then my youngest is going to UTC, which is University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. We went and visited on Sunday and Monday together, and we walked the campus. So
That's great, man.
what I'll tell you is this is what my dad hoped for. This is
Mhm.
what he dreamed, that I would be different than him. And that's why I went to private school and he invested in me. And I'm so grateful for it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, now were you going to say that your dad had other kids out of wedlock? Out of
Oh, no, not at all.
okay,
My
okay.
brother, on the other hand, was quite fertile.
Oh, all right, all right,
That's
all
where
right.
I was going with
All
that.
right.
No.
Okay. Okay.
My dad, no, not at all.
So you,
Um,
so I, yeah, I had assumed because times are different back then. Because
well,
I'll be honest with you,
Tito Santana, I talked to his estranged daughter the other
yeah,
day. She's we've texted back and forth, but he just found out he's related to Jenna Santana,
Hmm.
like just about
Yeah,
2 years ago. I
yeah.
don't know
Well,
if you knew about that.
I did not know about that, but I have a lot in common with Tito Santana. Well, I have a lot in common with their kids. Then that's just the guys. Men back then. Men were men back then. They drank, they fought, and they had sex.
John,
Yeah.
let me slow you down for 30 seconds.
All
And
right, go
I'm going to
ahead.
say one thing that will change your world.
Okay, go ahead.
How many freaking channels did they have available
That's right.
in the hotel room?
That's right.
3.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Why do you think my dad ate tuna fish and sardines and went to the gym 8 hours a day?
Yeah, that's
He
right.
was trying to control his urges.
Ah, okay, okay.
I
Yeah.
like at the end of the
While
day, like
everybody else was, banging them two at
at
a
the
time.
bar and drinking and doing coke, and it was the early 80s. It wasn't even illegal yet, right?
Right,
So
right.
like I don't think people understand how blitzed they were during WrestleMania.
Oh yeah, no, it we know now from the stories we read. I mean, there are famous wrestling matches where the guys come in plastered. I mean, the Texas
John,
tornado. I mean,
let me just tell you,
all right, go ahead.
I have stories that will make your hair fall out, and
All
you're
right,
already
good.
bald.
All right, good. So
So
we'll get to that
I'll give,
for another
I'll
time.
give the short version was
All right.
they would go to, so when they would wrestle in Toronto, they would go and stay in the same hotel in New York, and the concierge there would know that they were staying, and they would give them the same hotel room for like 14 days, even though they stayed there for 2 days. That way they could share their drugs with them, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
without being, somebody else coming in, and they would hide it. They would put it in the corner, pull up the carpet and hide it under there, or put it in the safe. Like, and I remember my dad when I used to bartend in downtown Atlanta, and he was questioning whether, my partying. He's like, Travis, you don't understand. This stuff will kill you now. He's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. No,
it's not the
absolutely.
same, bro.
Yeah.
And now 30 years later, I had this conversation with my son. I'm like, dude, this is no joke. Like, you will die.
Yeah.
It's not Colombian
No, it's
natural
not
stuff.
pure. Everything is the what do they put it in now?
They distill fentanyl.
Fentanyl. That's the big thing now that's killing all these kids.
Right.
So, all right. So we're getting off track, but okay. So your dad is at WWF. He's at the height of his career, and you truly believe that if Vince dangles the belt probably in front of him, maybe in front of Piper, all these other, so on and so forth, and you believe that it's a possibility that if your dad actually just spoke to Vince, that he would have been able to drop the belt to him.
Well, I think if my dad could prove that he was not going to go off so understand, my dad, when he left WWF, he just didn't show up. My dad got investors and he bought a bowling center down in Fayetteville, Georgia, which was just outside the airport, that didn't allow drinking or smoking. You ever heard of a bowling center without drinking and smoking?
Yeah, no, not at all.
My dad had come to faith, and you have to understand that when he was in his run, when he left, I think he was 37. He wasn't a young buck. Right. So that's a difference maker. And Hogan, I think, is 7 years younger or 6 years younger.
Yeah.
That's a lifetime in wrestling.
Yeah. So now when he's in WWF, is he staying clear of all the shenanigans, or he dove headfirst right in with partying and so on and so forth?
Well, all I can tell you is that he would bring me on the road for weeks at a time with him.
Okay.
Weeks at a time.
Okay.
Like, I would get permission from school to go on the road with him for 3 weeks. I went to Australia with him for a month. We were in New York for 2 weeks, Boston for 2 weeks, Chicago for 2 weeks, Seattle for 2 weeks, LA for 2 weeks, Dallas for 2 weeks. It was not uncommon for me to spend weeks at a time on the road with him, on the bus tours, just being, his son, because that was the only time we got to spend together, because he, was on the road 350 days a year. So I think my dad would. I think my dad, towards the end, because he always told me this, he could not stand being away from his family anymore. And it broke his heart. So I think he was torn, because going back to his upbringing, you think he wanted his kids to grow up the same way he did?
Right.
So he came home and became a family man, and we went to church together, and we bought a bowling center. And my dad was at all my baseball games, all my wrestling matches, all my football games, from the time that I was 9 till I was 18. He was always my greatest encourager. And so I think he was past his prime at some point. His body couldn't take much more. And I think he just chose to be a father.
Okay.
Now, he still had to take care of his family, which is why he ended up at WCW, but it was in Atlanta. So he was down the street from us most of the time.
Okay. I got you. So what you're saying is he probably didn't dabble as much as the other guys.
He always told me that he knew when to turn it off.
Okay.
And so I have no doubt he's my father, and I adore him, but he's a human being.
Right.
And it
right,
was
right.
the 80s, and he was professional wrestler.
Mhm.
And I know some of the stories of other things that happened, right? So,
Sure.
I don't think I have to elaborate to say I have no doubt that he did it.
Right.
He did steroids. He admitted that to me.
Right.
That wasn't uncommon.
Mhm.
He did cocaine. I think that's all he really touched. He never was a big drinker. Yeah,
Mhm.
he never drank beer until he got cancer. And the
Wow.
doctor told him to drink beer for calories.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
In fact, for my 21st birthday, I had to beg him to take me out for a drink because he just didn't drink. And so when we went out, he drank a shot of Jack Daniels, was like, I'm good. Let me have some water,
Right.
unsweet tea.
Right.
And I'm like, Dad, like,
Yeah.
where's Jaeger? Come on, brother.
Yeah, that's because those are some wild times back then, man, and those guys were no joke. I mean, so
Now, Piper, Flair,
yeah, Flair
I got stories for days, bro.
Yeah. But we could do that. We could do a wrestling thing another time. But I really want to talk about your dad because you see, the reason why I idolized your dad so much was because he was into bodybuilding. And I always was into bodybuilding. As you can see behind me, I competed a few times and so on and so forth.
I see
yeah.
that. I see it.
So I always loved your dad in wrestling. I always loved Tony Atlas because he was Mr. USA, right? Of course, Hogan. And you go down the line of all these guys that were it was the 80s. So, between them and Schwarzenegger and Stallone, I always wanted to look like them, right? In the ring, was he a professional, and did he tolerate people that couldn't hang with him in the ring?
So my dad was a consummate professional because and I know that he instilled this into me. He was always a trainer. I think Hiro Matsuda was such a great influence on him that the way he approached wrestling was, hey, you missed this, well, let me show you this. Now, what he wouldn't tolerate, and it goes into when he injured his arm, was somebody coming to the ring messed up. Because my dad always came to perform. So if I had to count on one hand how many times he partied, I think that would be legit. I think it would have been, almost he was influenced by his environment versus him being the influence of the environment. And so I would say that he, again, when I was on the road with him, we were eating tuna fish out of a can with mustard and crackers. And that is no joke. That is what, when we would, like, I remember when we would go on the road, like my biggest treat was a yoo-hoo.
Right.
Other than that, we were eating beef jerky.
Yeah. All the protein.
Absolutely. Like, and I'm 7.
Yeah,
bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, my teeth aren't even strong enough for this jerky, bro.
Yeah.
So dad was always in legit shape. Like, I remember him, like, and this sounds funny. I used to have to shave his back. Like,
really?
At 6 years old, we had the trimmers, and I would be so afraid I was going to cut him, and I would catch him every once in a while, and he would, whatever. And I'd be like, Dad, I'm so sorry. He's like, it's okay. So I would shave his neck and back at like 6 years old before he went out of town because he would be home on a Thursday night. I would get to sleep in his bed, and we would, wake up in the morning, go to the gym, and he'd come back, take a shower. I'd shave his neck, and he'd go to the airport. That was my childhood.
Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. So now he has it. So he has his peak at WWF.
Yep.
He's in WrestleMania, which is the greatest wrestling match ever put together at the time, so on and so forth. We don't have time to go into the Vince McMahon and how he pulled it off and all that. Your dad was still with WWF after that for several years, though, wasn't he?
So that would be 84. He left in 87.
Okay.
Right before WrestleMania 4.
All right.
And I could be wrong. I think WrestleMania 3 rubbed him the wrong way.
WrestleMania 3 was Andre the Giant and
correct.
All right.
So I think he was supposed to be him and Hogan, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And that broke his heart.
Now in WrestleMania 2, it was Hogan and Bundy.
Right.
To me, that would be even worse. Because I could Andre the Giant was a main eventer for years.
Well, but
Bundy
he
was
had no movement at that point. I think that everybody
right,
knew he was washed up, that it was nobody knew how he would perform. Like
right.
how much, like he was way overweight. Like Andre was always
Yeah,
big, but
yeah.
at that point he was not in good shape. So what kind of match are you going to get? So and they were worried
Exactly.
about that till it ended.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that Andre just got that adrenaline one more time,
Yeah.
and he finished it out right.
Because if you remember in WrestleMania 2, it was Hogan and Bundy in that blue steel cage. And then 1 year later, Bundy is wrestling midgets in WrestleMania 3.
Well, because everybody knew WrestleMania 2 was it was the biggest disappointment since your honeymoon night.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, your wife was like, here's what's going to happen. You're like, really? That's it? I thought we were going to get free gone.
That was horrible. Yeah, because I would have much rather, because your dad was, I mean, not taking anything away from Bundy. I mean, he was a great heel. He passed, right?
He passed, and he's still not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. But your dad was an exceptional heel.
Dad, because you believe that Dad could destroy Hulk Hogan.
Right.
In spite of his stature, in spite of his Hulkamaniacs, there was something that was so believable that my dad could legit kick your butt.
Oh, he could.
And the reason is because he actually could.
Right. So
I see some of these photos where, like, they show my dad posing, right?
Yeah.
And Hulk Hogan's posing. He's like trying to, and my dad's like out here, and his traps are just like,
it was, it was,
he's got like a pyramid of, and Hulk his body kind of sucked.
Yeah, he was a big dude, but he wasn't
some kind of physical specimen, but he was a great orator.
Yeah, absolutely. So did he have another main event run in WWF after WrestleMania, or that was it?
He had a main event run after WrestleMania because they had Toronto with him and Hogan. I mean, they main evented several times.
Okay, right.
Multiple times. Him and Piper too.
So
there was those runs. And I'll tell you something, John. Vince told my dad one time, and I'm going to use profanity for the first time in a long time.
Oh, sorry, I use it all the time.
He said, he said, Paul, don't fuck me, and you'll have a job the rest of your life.
Who said that to him?
Vince.
Okay.
Junior.
I gotcha.
And my dad didn't show up for wrestling in 1987, and Vince was done with him.
Yeah.
And my dad made that choice.
Okay. And why didn't he show up?
I think because he was hurt, and he was too ashamed to say he couldn't go on.
Okay.
And he didn't want to have the surgery. He was so narcissistic about his body that a scar would just have it destroyed his image in his mind. I could break down the psychology of it because I've done it multiple times with my psychiatrist, going, hey, this makes sense why he did what he did. It wasn't because he was, afraid. It was because he was ashamed. He didn't know what Paul Orndorff was without a perfect body. He believed he was Mr. Wonderful. It protected his inner child.
Okay. I could see that. Now, was that the famous injury where he didn't have the surgery and he had the muscle atrophy?
Yeah. So I've heard so many stories about, what happened. My dad's opinion was it happened with a wrestler that was inebriated. And he did a pile driver on him. When he did, he, went the wrong way to protect him because he was too drunk. And, that's how it happened. But I think that's absolutely ridiculous. It's like knowing where you get COVID from. You have no freaking clue. It could have been that. It could have been, but I just don't think he knows.
Yeah.
And here's the irony of it, John. So he injured his arm and I think he was 32.
Oh.
So I'm at the gym. I do I'm doing incline bench with dumbbells, 65 pounds, nothing big.
Right.
And I hear a pop. I put the dumbbells down after I finished my set. Come home, I'm like, man, this is kind of sore. Next day, I throw a softball. When I do, my labrum, my bicep, and my rotator cuff come off.
Oh,
My humerus bone gets wrapped by my tricep, and it creates a spiral fracture of my humerus bone. And all those bone fractures go through my radial nerve and leave my arm completely paralyzed.
wow.
So I end up having to get I got all of my fingers transferred from my radial nerve to my ulnar nerve. You have the extra tendon in your wrist that's for stability. So that's how my arm operates. It doesn't work up top, but it works down bottom. I say all that to say, I have no idea how my dad got hurt, but somehow the both of us had the exact same injury. Mine was a little more devastating, but I have to believe there's something to that. There's no way we both had the same injury at almost the exact same age, unless there's some kind of hereditary something.
Okay. So now Vince is done with them in 1987. Now, does he go right to WCW or he opens the bowling alley?
No, we opened the bowling alley.
And he decides he's done with wrestling at that time.
He's done with wrestling. He's out speaking at churches, giving his testimony. He had become a Christian about a year before that. Mm-hmm. And so he was speaking, and he opened the bowling center. And then after a couple of years, he realized, that it wasn't performing. And so he went back to
especially with no drinking or smoking.
WWF. Huh?
I said, especially with no drinking or smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, the funny thing is had I been my brother's age when we opened the bowling center, that thing would still be in our family.
Yeah,
that's all
right,
I'm gonna say. Right. So Dad, he went back to wrestling with UWF. And
wow.
Yeah, with Herb Abrams.
Oh my God, that lunatic.
Oh, dude, bro.
Wow.
Okay, let me just tell you real quick.
We need about 3 hours for this podcast.
Oh my God, I swear to God. So we go to Los Angeles when I'm 13 years old. Dad's about to sign with UWF, and we're going to Australia for the month, and he's wrestling at Wonderland under a promoter. Great deal. We're sitting at the upper deck. I've got my own space. I'm sleeping on the floor. I've got my own bed. It's the most amazing trip you can imagine. I'm talking total TikTok video. You would just go, hey, I'm on a plane. Right. And so we go meet Herb at this restaurant. Bro, I'm 13. And I look at Dad and I go, how much caffeine did he drink?
Yeah, it wasn't caffeine.
It was. I was 13.
Yeah, you didn't know anything.
And he was going a mile a minute. And I'm pretty quick-witted.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and he was asking me about something, about me playing football or something, baseball or whatever. And I would start to answer and he would interrupt. And I just kept looking at Dad, and I'm like, I don't want to be disrespectful, but can I say something? I don't know. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. So Dad, Herb is sitting there doing these handshakes. And so Herb invites us to go to dinner that night. My dad declines, right? So we get in the car, and I'm like, Dad, why? It's I was kind of looking forward to dinner. He's like, no, you don't need to be around him.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So did your dad sign with UWF?
Oh, he did. He had several great matches with Dr. Death, Steve Williams.
Okay.
I think that was the best part of that run. It didn't last long. You know how cokeheads are.
Yeah. Let's quickly, for people who don't know who Herb, what's his name? Williams?
Herb Abrams.
I'm sorry. For people who don't know who Herb Abrams is in UWF, quickly, if you can, give them a small description of what that actually was.
Okay. So imagine somebody with a mullet, beautiful rattlesnake boots, with jeans tucked into them, long gray hair, very, very, very majestic, but at the same time, the hair chest showing. And then a glass table with a bunch of cocaine on it.
Yeah.
That's Herb Abrams. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. So
he was out of control.
Yeah, he was out of his
mind. Started this promotion like very much like and not to compare it to some of the like the Silicon Valley stuff, but
It's
he
okay.
kind of created this promotion like that lady that did the blood test. Like it was a complete pyramid scheme, and he promised all these things, and he became the promoter, and then he became the face, kind of like Vince McMahon. But he was so bad. I mean,
Yeah.
he was so bad. But he had some good matches, and he got some good talent. But it was, man, talk about a cocaine train wreck.
I think he still has the record for the least amount of pay-per-views for a wrestling pay-per-view.
It was like 4.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
It was like the first, my dad wasn't on that one, but it was the first pay-per-view he did, and it was like the first one. And
Yeah.
I'm not even joking. I think it was single digits.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was really bad. And it had all the potential in the world, but he just had the wrong man promoter. Yeah, it just had the wrong guy running
and
it.
You can't wrestle out of California.
Yeah, and
that's not a territory zone. I'm sorry,
but I see. I didn't realize.
No, listen, wrestling is very unique to cultures.
That's
and you have to understand where your fans are. Now it's changed through the last 40 years, but back in 1990, it wasn't mainstream.
Right.
It's mainstream now, but it wasn't back then.
So at any given
wrestlers with 1 million followers, there was barely 1 million people watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was completely different. So that UWF tanks, I think it only lasted a couple of years, right? And Herb was basically, he was most famous for his cocaine and his hooker addiction. That was really it. So it tanks. Then your father signs with WCW.
Right. And so that's the Dudes with Attitudes. You remember them?
The Dudes with Attitudes.
Look that up, baby.
Okay.
That's Sting, my dad.
Because this was right before WCW.
No, this is WCW.
No, but right before WCW took off with NWO and so on and so forth. This is before that.
This is like 6 years before that.
Okay.
I think this is like 92, 93.
Right.
So I want to say I know for a fact I was in college, which would have been 1997, when I drove up to Huntsville, Alabama. My dad was a promoter at the time. This would have been 97. I was at Sanford University in Alabama, and we went up to Huntsville, Alabama. I brought one of my roommates up there to see the show, and they were doing NWO. And, I walked, funny story. So I walk in, I'm signaling dad down, like as I pull up, because I know what I'm supposed to do. And I'm just sitting there. I was like, can you get my dad? And the security guard's like, what are you talking about? I was like, my dad's Paul Orndorff. Just go get him. And they're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, just go get him. He'll know who I am. So dad comes over, signals me in, brings in my roommate with me. I walk in the room, and Hulk, Macho Man, and my dad are sitting there. And so Terry and Randy are wearing their NWO garb. And so I walk in the room, and dad goes, hey, Terry, you remember my son Travis? And he's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
He's like, man, you've gotten old. And and my dad said, yeah, he's going to school at Sanford University. He wants to be a minister. And Terry looks at me and goes, well, don't get too goddamn smart on us. And Randy looks at me and goes, he just said he's going to be a fucking minister. Why would you say GD? Yeah. And I'm like, I look at Randy. I'm like, I don't know if that's any better. But I appreciate you. So, I got to hug him and see that side of it. But at that point, he was a promoter. And then shortly after that became the trainer for the power plant.
Oh, that's right. He was the trainer for the power plant. So when was it? Yeah, exactly. When was it that he decided, I'm going to be a booker, and I'm done wrestling?
So when I want to say 1994, 95, he had broke his neck. And I say broke his neck. I shouldn't say that. It was his spine. So his first surgery on his spine which was part of his neurological disorder in his arm, was he needed to get his 4th through 8th vertebrae replaced and put in a cadaver's vertebrae. So they started that surgery, which was kind of the strangest thing. He had this little neck scar. So in fact, he wrestled Disco Inferno the last match, and then the Horseman, kind of put him out. And kind of put it over that
Storyline,
way. And then he had neck surgery. I graduated from high school, and he was in a neck brace for a year. Fattest I've ever seen my dad, bro. I remember he basically was, couldn't move. He was in a chair. He slept in a chair for 8 months, 9 months. And I remember he was probably, 255. And I was like, Dad,
Yeah, you're a
bro,
fat
I hate to say this, it's time to make a change.
Yeah, you got to lose weight.
and I kid you not, if you thought he was in great shape before, when he had that surgery, he had veins running down his abs.
Really?
Like, no, bro, not one, like 6.
Yeah.
He had veins that ran through his abs. He was doing the ab straps and doing like a 500 a set. And he was doing like 6 sets twice a day.
Yeah, he was a freaky athlete. He was a freak of nature. That's it. So I just want to get on to the topic of we definitely have to do a part 2 because there's just too much information. But your dad was a legitimate tough guy.
Yeah,
there's no question about it.
No question.
But he wasn't the only one. Back then in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of tough guys that were wrestlers. And a lot of them came from rough backgrounds.
Absolutely.
But your dad had the reputation of being one of the toughest, right? It's basically like stories of him and Tonga or Haku.
Right. Haku was a bad.
Yeah. And then it's him, bro. Rick Rude, Tonga.
Rick Rude was my dad's best friend.
That makes sense. Okay.
I do. When I tell you his best friend, let me tell you something really cool. And I know we've got a time limit, probably not 12 minutes or so. But Rick would come down to my house so they could go hunting. And he would give me the keys to his car so I could take my girls out on dates.
That's great.
So I got to, no, I'm not kidding. He brought down his Jaguar and he's like, hey, drive the Jaguar this weekend.
That's
and
great.
My dad, Rick was awesome. Awesome. Yeah. He was so cool.
Now, since we're on Rick, I'm going to ask you one question. Is it true the way he died?
Yes.
It is true. So do you want to explain as to how he actually died? Because it's real. Oh, you don't. Do we skip it?
Yeah.
Okay. So we skip it. Okay. So.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
When he passed, I've never seen my dad cry so hard.
Oh, okay. We skip it. That's fine.
Yeah. So Rick will always be, to me, one of the greats, and that's how I want to remember.
Okay, that's fine. We skip it. And he was one of the greats, clearly. And he's another one that could have had a great rivalry with Hulk
Should
Hogan.
have.
Yeah, there was definitely, there's no question about it. And a legitimate tough guy and champion arm wrestler. Am I right?
That's correct. My dad as well.
Oh, really? I did not know that because
I'll send you the video clip of him winning. Dude, he won rowing championships in college. He won discus championships in high school. He won broad jump championships. He ran a 4.540 at 205.
Wow.
As a fullback.
Yeah, he was just a freak of nature. That's really it.
Complete freak.
One last question, I'm going to let you go. And this question just bothers me so much about wrestling today because I can't even watch it for 12 seconds anymore. But to me, what makes wrestling are the heels. I mean, anybody could be a good guy, right? I mean, so on and so forth. The heels are what makes wrestling. Why do you think that the heels today are not even close to what they were in the 70s and 80s? Why can't they get the heat they used to get?
Social media. So somebody commented, I'm going to bring up 2 wrestlers, and there's only 2 in my lifetime that stuck with who they were till the very end. My father and the Undertaker.
And the Undertaker. Okay.
And the Undertaker. Mm-hmm. They never changed. Like they never went in public and did movies and did social media and like it now granted people love the Undertaker, but if you were to go back to the 80s and I've mentioned this before, my dad built his career on dislikes.
Right.
Imagine if you had a Instagram page and the only thing they measured was dislikes. My dad was voted the most hated person in America in 1985.
Yeah.
Like, think about that. Like, and I'm telling you, when I was a kid, there was times we would leave the arena and the hospital the ambulance would take us to our car. My dad would have all the stuff covering over so they knew who he didn't know who he was. We'd get to the car. This is in Philadelphia and Boston. And we get in the car and we're trying to drive off. Somebody told them where all the fans told us where they were, and they tried to turn our car over. And I'm in the car. My dad's pushing me into the floorboard going, it'll be fine. Police have to push them off the car so we can drive to the next town and do it over again.
That's amazing.
And you'll never see that again.
No,
people even hate the Ukraine like they do my dad.
Yeah.
Russia, excuse me.
Yeah, right. I'm going to let you go, but tell me if you think these two things have anything to do with why bad guys can't get heat today. Social media, I definitely agree with 100%. The first one is making money with paraphernalia. Because when I was a kid, I never wanted an Iron Sheik t-shirt. Nobody. I don't know. Yeah. And the other one is
that was anti-American.
Yeah, there was no way I never wanted an Iron Sheik t-shirt, right. Or honestly, or Mr. Wonderful t-shirt.
Absolutely. That wasn't his t-shirts he sold were Paula.
Yeah. yeah.
That was his number one. That was his number one merchandise. Was a t-shirt. It was a black t-shirt with yellow words said Paula.
Okay. Yeah.
That was his gimmick, man. But it was legit. Like, that was my dad. Like,
right.
That's method acting at its best. So if you want to know what the number one issue is, why there's no heat, nobody wants to be disliked anymore. Everybody wants to be liked.
And since wrestling is very corporate and they want to sell. And the other thing is political correctness. You really can't pull the shit you used to be able to pull in the 70s and 80s.
Can you?
They don't. I don't know if they can.
Think about it. Hold on.
Go ahead.
If you did, wouldn't you get heat?
Oh, big time. But you'd get canceled too.
Nobody can handle the heat is the issue.
Okay. Is that what you think it is? Okay.
Absolutely. Because if you have to have, if you're okay, if the only thing you're worried about is your stock price, you're not willing to take that risk. And there's a reason independent wrestling it's no different. Like, it's all, acrobats and that kind of stuff. Nobody's working a hold. Nobody's doing the dirty stuff and being the bad guy.
So you don't think
dad, when he walked in the ring, do you remember him ever raising his hands to getting people's attention?
No,
unless he was mocking Hulk Hogan.
That's right. Yeah, he was just took off. Yeah, absolutely. Had an
Why do you think Brock
him.
Lesnar still has a career?
Oh, okay. Very good point. Okay. All right. So you don't think political, you don't think that, because they said, I remember back in the day, you questioning somebody's manhood or questioning somebody's ethnic background, or Macho Man would throw his wife in front of, the good guy to protect himself from him. I remember in Piper's Pit when he was feuding with Tony Atlas, and he was telling him, how are you going to train? Are you going to eat, do you eat soul food?
There's obviously a measure of irresponsibility from back then. I'm not dismissing what you don't have to, but my dad never said those words and got just as much heat.
Good point. Very good point. That's
Period.
very valid. Very valid.
Don't have to get heat by being a racist.
Very valid. Very
that
valid.
Is a cheap way out.
Yeah, very valid.
And we should respect every human being, but we can diminish them as a wrestler all day long and not attack their culture.
Yeah.
And for us to go back to what they did would be irresponsible and disrespectful. My dad got heat because he was against Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Not because Hulk Hogan was white, not because Hulk Hogan was blonde, because he hated Hulk Hogan. Period.
Very valid point. Never thought of that you're 100% right. And that actually changed my opinion. That's right. Okay. Travis, I have to thank you. And we definitely have to do a part 2 because there's so much we could talk about. We could start our own show on just fucking wrestling. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I'll talk to my producer, Tyler Olnick. He's an amazing man out of Canada. We'll see if we can't figure something out.
That'd be great, man. That'd be absolutely fantastic. And well, yeah, we'll definitely. I'm gonna try my hardest to have this out by tomorrow. So we'll see. You know what I mean? But
Whatever. I'll be honest with you. I don't remember what we said. I just know that it was honest and transparent, and it'll be fun.
It can't. Yeah. That's the one thing that I've noticed that works with podcasts and YouTube is the transparency and being genuine and honest. People respect. And people pick up when you're full of shit right away. You know,
it's like watching The View.
Yeah,
you want to shoot yourself in the brain.
Yeah,
like I literally watch them talking. I'm like, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm loading 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag without gloves on.
Yeah, I can't watch that shit. I just can't.
Well, I don't. It's just it's the essence. I can barely watch ESPN anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Or my when I have to sit and when I come home and my wife is watching one of the housewives.
Oh God.
Yeah. That's
my
I'm just
wife
like
these Blind Love on Netflix. And
yeah.
I will walk upstairs and she'll have it on. And I just kind of lay in the bed. I'm like, no, you can watch it. And she's like, no, it's okay. I'll turn it off. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. Travis, right, thank you very much, sir. And it was
thank you. Sorry I missed you last week.
Oh, don't worry about it. It was an absolute honor to have you on, man. Absolute honor.
Blessing. Had a good time.
Thank you very much, sir. And remember, subscribe and like. And I'm going to be bringing you more shit, just like Travis Orndorff. And share it with everybody. Gotta give you enough fucking content. Do it.